Welcome to those of you listening on News Radio 600 Kogo. My name is Scott Lewis. I'm here with my friend Andrew Keatts.
What's up, buddy?
Sara, Libby.
Hello.
Hello, everybody. Back from Utah. The last show we did that I was on was the live show at Whistle Stop, which was a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm. It was good.
I enjoyed that tremendously. We'll do more of those. And at that show, Assemblywoman Lorena Gonzalez said that Kevin Faulconer, the mayor of San Diego, is not a very courageous man.
I don't say he's terrible. He's just not brave. Hey, that's the
shots fired.
No, that's not shots.
Fired.
That's not shots. It's a different governing style, and it's one which has been true to San Diego for a long time, and hopefully will change. He's a nice guy.
She really didn't like my suggestions that she was saying something that could be seen as an insult. She's like, no, this is just a description of the world. Yeah.
Maybe that had something to do with it, but he came into the podcast studio, did a special podcast. I interviewed him. I had 30 minutes exactly, and I had a bunch of questions that I barely able to get through in 30 minutes, but it was pretty good. It's in your feed.
Yeah, you might have already listened to it.
Check it out if you haven't. It's in there, the Kevin Faulconer interview. It wasn't as spicy as the one he did, 6 months ago or so?
Was it that
you
long
were
ago?
You were on leave, yeah, so it was about then.
Boy.
Yeah, so it wasn't quite as spicy. He was
We'll
fired
all be
up
dead
that day.
soon, huh?
Yeah, I guess. Fascism, dead. What else is going through your mind these days?
Just those two things, really.
So check that out. And also stay tuned for the next live show. I had a lot of fun. I really getting the audience involved. A lot of people there. It was just
people were pumped.
Feeling, huh? Yeah. And found out that J.D. Wicker. Shout out to J.D. Wicker, the athletic director for the San Diego State University. He is a listener of the show. He was jarred by that music, the MTS music that we
didn't
played.
have the levels exactly right. It did.
He almost got in a car wreck. I said, sorry, JD.
It did blow out my earbuds as well.
It was good.
It was loud, and yet it's the best song.
It's the best song.
There is.
Can we get
if you're
that?
gonna play a song,
let's play that a little bit. All right.
Let's go ride the trolley. It will be lots of fun.
So, big news. This is. It was already big news week. It was already interesting news week, but then
I want to correct. It is an interesting news week on all of the very most boring topics that there are.
Come on.
So now I am thrilled by it. But when we used to get to talk about
why do you have to be self-conscious of our wonkishness?
Well,
just own it. Just feel it.
True. I just want people to be clear that
if you're listening to this show, you're on board, man.
Look,
you're on board the wonk.
I hope get ready for some writ of mandate discussion.
The California Supreme Court unanimously on Thursday decided that former San Diego Mayor Jerry Sanders violated the law. It's not a good thing.
You're not supposed to do that, to my understanding.
When he pursued a ballot measure to eliminate pensions for future employees, the ruling does not necessarily invalidate the 2012 Proposition B that voters overwhelmingly passed, but it sure sets the stage to do that. And should that happen, it would set in motion, I think, an almost incomprehensibly complex series of remedies. I cannot myself imagine.
You're going to have to comprehend it.
It's going to be happening. Something. So
it's very complex.
It's really complex. So let's start with what we know.
Okay.
Basically, if you weren't around 2011, 2012, there was an effort. Carl DeMaio came up with a plan to get rid of pensions for all city employees, for all future city employees. The mayor and others were thinking of different things, and they said, well, how about you change that and just get rid of them for don't do police.
Yeah.
Keep police pensions. Do the rest.
Yes.
They also came up with the idea to freeze pensionable pay for 5 years. That's kind of a side note now because 5 years is over. But
is it a side note?
Oh, I don't know. Okay.
right?
Yeah.
I've been thinking it through. It might not be a side note. You might actually just put money in people's pockets.
Okay.
Because anyway, we'll get to it.
So that happened. The mayor of San Diego at the time, Mayor Jerry Sanders, supported it, did a lot to support it, championed it as his, used his staff, all kinds of things. The court ruled today that the line between official action and private activities undertaken by public officials may be less clear in other circumstances. However, when a local official with responsibility over labor relations uses the power and resources of his office to play a major role in the promotion of a ballot initiative affecting terms and conditions of employment, the duty to meet and confer arises. And this is what the unions had said, that if he wanted to pursue this ballot measure, he should have sat down with them first as part of the process known as meet and confer, required under the Miles-Millis-Brown Act, or otherwise known as state law.
I want to say you did not pick out the spiciest parts of that.
Oh, please.
Because as complex as this whole thing is, the one thing that they determined was not complex at all was whether the mayor had a duty to meet and confer, and they dispensed of this in like a few scathing sentences.
Yeah.
And we're like, it's so obvious he had to. It's not even funny.
Yeah,
I'm paraphrasing.
It was
these
quite
important justices.
It was actually pretty plain spoken. It was just like, no, you obviously have to negotiate.
He definitely did, and he didn't.
It
might be unclear in some cases, but it is
it's
very
not unclear
clear.
here.
Didn't they say that? They said, usually this is a question of fact,
right?
Like where the facts are disputed, but no facts
Nobody
are disputed.
disputes the facts here.
So I think it's important to dial back. So the unions made the case, like you have to meet with it. And remember, we had Michael Zucchet in this room, saying he's the leader of the largest city employees union. He said, look, that's there for a reason, because if they meet with us, we might say, hey, you don't have to go do this. We'll do this, this, and this, and maybe we'll avoid all the cost and trouble of doing that.
I think that's his take, which he has said many times over, is maybe the most the most poorly understood and the most understated of this whole dispute, which is the proponents of the initiative. Their talking points have always been, it is absurd to think that citizens must go meet with labor unions and ask for their permission before they pursue a change to the city's charter.
They have free expression rights.
Yeah,
they can do whatever they want.
And the MEA's position has always been very simple and clear, which is, yes, but the mayor is the mayor, and he does not have a choice. He must negotiate with us. And the second and most important part is that doesn't mean that we get like a veto over this. That doesn't mean he has to get us on board. He just has to talk. They could have the talks and declare that they went nowhere and then move on.
If they get to an impasse, the city,
can impose, literally. Yeah.
Can just impose. So, which is, it's interesting because it to some extent means like this all could have been avoided relatively easily.
And so then the discussion gets, well, is this just a technicality and a mistake, or is it something bigger? And my argument is it's something bigger.
Yeah.
Because what was happening in 2012 was a rivalry for credit on this whole thing. And remember, Carl DeMaio came up with this. Now, he could have come up with this, had press conferences outside the city and made this happen himself. He's a city councilman. He's not the lead negotiator of labor issues at the city like the city CEO, Strong Mayor, is.
Right.
But there was this tension between him and Mayor Jerry Sanders, and Sanders wanted badly to have ownership and to be seen as the creator of this. It was his thing. And the ruling does a great job summarizing all the points that the unions used to make the point that it was his. He used his own office. He was at City Hall. He was talking about it being his.
He signed the ballot, Mayor Jerry Sanders.
Yeah, and he did all of these things. And so it was his. And so he ended up getting credit. But that credit has now cost the city potentially immeasurably in the sense of the issue and the dilemma it has to work through right now.
And to be clear about just how complex this is, it also might have cost the city nothing.
Yeah, that's what's
like
so
it is the range of outcomes still here remains to be like millions of dollars and untold complexity in unwinding this, or nothing.
Yeah, so the ruling basically said, okay, the appellate court was wrong when they said this was all fine. So the appellate court needs to realize it's not fine and decide accordingly about what to do. And so, the possibilities of what could happen. On the one hand, ballot measures, there's often a candidate who does something wrong, but they don't lose their, mayorship or something during their, after they've finished their campaign. Is it like that? Or do they really try to claw back 5 years of experience? So let's lay the groundwork. 4,000 or so employees have been hired since this rule passed. They don't get pensions, and they haven't been contributing to a pension since they've been getting a 401k. And that 401k is partly contributed by the city, partly by the employee, and that has been making money. There's a lot of employees who have left city service after starting in that period, and there's a lot of employees who wouldn't want the pension because of the how much they've made and how much the old pension already was. And so there's the idea of somehow clawing that all back into the way things were before 2012. That's what we're overwhelmed by.
And so now getting back to the question I asked at the beginning, the measure ended pensions for new city hires and created 401ks for them, and it also froze pensionable pay for all employees for 5 years. Now, that freeze of pensionable pay for 5 years is also a meet and confer issue.
Mm-hmm. And that was the most impactful thing on the pension's financial health. Yeah,
that was where the savings came from. And so now I could be wrong about this, but if the ruling is simply that the mayor had to go negotiate with the labor unions to make this change, I don't see why that would only be true for the 401k switch and not for the 5-year pensionable pay freeze. So if it's also true of the 5-year pensionable pay freeze, could that be retroactively undone?
I guess the question with that was a freeze. It didn't actually cut anything though, right?
But they still have to agree to labor contracts.
Yeah, I don't know, man. The contracts they signed during that were agreed and were meet and conferred that conformed to that.
That's true. Yeah, because all it did was set the city council's negotiating position.
Yeah.
So
I don't know, man.
It's so interesting that this all rests on the court that thought it was fine to begin with. Does that impact the outcome, given that there's such a huge range of ways that this could go? I mean, are they more inclined to be well, just go meet with them after the fact and then it's fine?
I have heard from supporters of the initiative today who feel buoyed by that, that it's going back to a friendlier place. The way I understand what's about to happen is that this court is going to say, all right, basically, here's our ruling on what happened and how bad it was and who has leverage and what. And then all those parties, the city, the labor unions, the IRS, they're all going to have to figure out what to do based on who has the standing.
Yeah, so I talked to Mike Keatts, general manager for MEA. His explanation to me was very helpful, which was that the appeals court is not going to get into the nitty-gritty minutia of unspooling this ball of yarn that's been created. They're not going to decide what happens with pensions. They're not going to decide who pays what amount of money to remake a pension. They're not going to do that stuff. They're going to decide very narrowly. This is MEA's expectation. They will decide very narrowly, does Prop B stand or must it be completely stricken from the books, the city and removed from the city charter? After that question is answered, then, as you say, all those parties get back to the table and the administrative remedy begins. But the appeals court will be simply asked for the judicial remedy of, is Prop B lawful?
So then we get into another question about what does this also mean for the legacies of not only former Mayor Jerry Sanders, who we found acted the way he did, but also the guy who told him that was okay former city attorney, good friend Jan Goldsmith.
Yeah. As Michael Zucchet delighted in pointing out at the appellate ruling a year ago, he said, I want to congratulate Jan for winning. This was his legal strategy. He has enacted it. He was very clear about what they intended to do and why they thought it was okay. And he has won today, and I'm very happy for him.
Playing the long game with that one.
And now, I guess maybe all of those facts remain. It's just now a ticket of shame that he gets to wear as a result.
So I pointed out the failure on Twitter, and I said, look, all they literally had to do was meet with the labor unions. And again, this seems like a minor thing they could have taken care of, and none of this would be happening. It's not like the actual taking away of pensions became a legal issue. And he responded. He said, look, meet and confer is a lot more than just, quote, meet. The city's labor lawyers and I decided, notice he throws them in too, and I decided it was not required under then current law to negotiate a citizens initiative. So did the Court of Appeal justices. The Supreme Court has just made new law. Prop B has not been reversed. So his whole thing is like, hey man, I didn't know they were going to conjure up new law. I did what old law said.
I don't know that that's what they did. They said this is clearly the rule and you didn't follow it.
Unanimously.
Yeah.
Unanimously. It was really and stark. But also, like, I'm sorry, like, that's the Supreme Court. It's just how it works. You know, It's just, you lost.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like being like, well, that's only a home run because the ball cleared the fence.
Yeah, Petco Park changed they changed the fences last year.
Sure, if you want to consider that a home run because it landed over the fence, which was arbitrarily decided by a ballpark architect. I don't know who appointed him arbiter.
I think the Chamber of Commerce, their big headline was like, Prop B not overturned.
Yeah.
Which should be like a little asterisk. Like, definitely it didn't go well for Prop B.
I talked to some folks in the city and they're like, look, this, I just want to be clear. This was not good.
Right.
This was not a good outcome for proponents of this initiative. So
also, I said that the appellate court is now faced with a pretty narrow decision about whether to strike or not strike Prop B off the books. That decision could be appealed by either side back to the Supreme Court.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, God. Okay. So this is fantastic. So my thing is just Jan Goldsmith should blanket apologize for his advice and for setting in motion this, again, awfully complex dilemma that the city has.
I'll do you one better. He should apologize to me personally because it is August 1st of 2018. I am 6 years older than I was when I was first covering this. And it's his fault. It's his fault that this is still part of my life. I don't want
just bingo. Every episode is bingo, and pensions are a thing.
Yeah,
stadium's a thing.
A lot of people owe me an apology about this. Frankly, I got a whole list. You guys are gonna get.
They
cards.
were so they would react to us with the most awful.
Do you remember when Perb was first hearing this in the run up to the June ballot? You couldn't have possibly treated it more dismissively than they treated it.
I got subpoenaed. Do you remember? Their whole, but yes, they're like, this is the dumbest case. Cannot believe you're talking about it. It's never
a done deal.
Frivolous Hail Mary.
Yeah.
Why would anyone think that we have to negotiate for a citizen initiative?
You know who thought that? All of the Supreme Court justices,
and
all of them.
They acted so haughty about it, and now, we're the only ones still here. The mayor's gone. Yeah. City attorney's gone.
Liam's gone. Liam owes me an apology.
And they're like, this always happens to me. I'm like, you're gonna be gone. I'm gonna still be podcasting about this stuff. You guys are gonna be like getting fat checks from your next jobs.
Yeah. Yeah, Liam was like tweeting out like old roundtable appearances today about like points he made. Like, oh yeah, it's real funny up in Sacramento, pal. We have to live this life.
Well, it wasn't the only of the interesting legal cases this week. We are going to get into that. There is a giant battle, just came out of nowhere, between the port and the airport authority, South Bay politicians, San Diego Old Guard.
Well, also like everything, we've talked about it 1 million times, but yes, it also came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Because nothing's ever new.
No.
Or
Nothing's
nothing
new.
ever
Time is
goes
a flat
away.
circle.
Yes.
So also, yeah, remember to check out that interview with the mayor. I asked him if he supports John Cox, the governor, the candidate for governor against Gavin Newsom. He was.
So you'll have to listen to the interview to know.
No, I'm just going to give it away. It's fine.
No.
No?
Under no circumstances.
Under no circumstances.
You've never listened to sports talk radio if you don't know how to do it easier.
All right. Sorry.
That answer coming up.
Yeah,
in your
that
feed.
answer in your feed. And the future of the Republican Party, he's still in. He's still in. He says there's a place for free traders like him still. He talked about that he really is going to eradicate vacation rentals. He's all in, gonna do it.
Oof.
My mom was in the line to go and speak. Hello, Mom, at the city council hearing that they almost called off. I would have been personally invested in them almost calling that off because I would have had to hear about it.
Yeah.
And they didn't. They had the vote. They reaffirmed their vote to eradicate vacation rental. I'm still amazed that that's going to happen.
How are any of these things going to work?
I don't know.
No one knows.
The city council also decided to put another ballot measure on, raise its own salary. Voters approved that and other things we can debate and discuss at PolitiFest. October 6th this year, we're going to have all these debates, future Mission Valley, all of the ballot measures, everything there will all be there. Put it on your calendar from 12 noon to about 6. This has been our show with News Radio 600 Kogo. Stay tuned for Hero and Go.
This Voice of San Diego podcast is brought to you by Manalatus Nelson Murphy, Advertising and Public Relations. As a nonprofit news organization, we depend on our members, foundations, and sponsors like M&M to provide funding to support the investigative journalism you expect from Voice of San Diego. We are very grateful for all of our supporters, and we will recognize them during the show. M&M is run by Tony Manalatus, Bob Nelson, and Kelly Murphy Lamkin, who bring a vast network and decades of experience to developers, public agencies, campaigns, and others. M&M bridges the gap between clients and the people whose influence matters most. M&M develops successful strategies and implements cost-effective tactics to help clients achieve their goals. The firm specializes in public affairs PR and advertising with an emphasis on media relations, crisis communications, community engagement, and cross-platform marketing. Our reporters at Voice of San Diego have heard from Tony and Bob a lot over the years. Tony, Bob, and Kelly are supporters of Voice of San Diego. Learn more about their firm at mnmadpr.com. And if you like Voice of San Diego's work and want to become a sponsor too, contact us at development@voiceofsandiego.org.
And we're back. I went to the Padres game the other day, and I got seats that were way, way under the overhang, and I was like really disappointed about that. So I moved,
like on the lower level, but towards the concourse.
Yeah, exactly. And I had my two kids with me. I got them out of the house so Ashley could have some time, and I just said, I'm moving. I'm going to go to the outfield far up where nobody cares, and moved them. And we had a blast. They ate more sugar than they have ever eaten in their lives.
What sugar did they eat?
Cotton candy.
Yes.
Lemonade.
Yes.
Dippin Dots.
Hard yes.
Dippin' Dots are so good.
And there was one.
It is weird that Dippin' Dots never took off. The two things that I just do not understand.
Took off. They're everywhere.
No, they should have replaced ice cream.
It's because of Sean Spicer's vendetta? Is he the anti-Dippin Dots?
Right. Sean Spicer. They are not the ice cream of the future. He tweeted like 600 times in his life. Yes.
Yeah, Sean Spicer had a weird vendetta against Dippin Dots. It's
That's like
amazing.
Like goes
one
back,
of my favorite things about him.
It's like the beginning of Twitter. Like in like 2008, there are early Sean Spicer tweets being like, "Just so you know, Dippin Dots are not the ice cream of the future." The other thing though that is really odd that it hasn't become more prevalent is Orangina. Orangina is delicious.
Yeah,
it is
good.
so refreshing.
It's
in a glass bottle, so it's freezing cold. It's in a smaller container, which is almost always the right amount. It's not too much sugar, but it's certainly more than water. It's a great beverage. It should have all the success that's gone to LaCroix should have been for Orangina, and I just don't know how you could stand here and say that like we have believe in the wisdom of the market, knowing
it's too much
what
sugar.
has happened to Orangina.
LaCroix took off because it has no sugar.
Soda took off? How do you explain soda pop?
Yeah, soda's down. Soda's the NFL of products right now.
There's still more soda sold in one day than LaCroix has sold in its entire existence. And here is Orangina, largely ignored. Like maybe it gets one little aisle in like a specialty liquor store. It's absurd. Influx sells Orangina, so a lot of times I go there and I get coffee and then I see the Orangina and I have to get it because it's so good.
Yeah, I like the little cover. You pull off the cover and it's really good.
It's in a bottle, you idiot. You don't even know what I'm talking about.
I was thinking of the lemon
Pellegrino.
one. Sorry.
You're thinking of Pellegrino,
which is also quite good.
Yeah, it's also good.
Definitely better than LaCroix,
but worse than Orangina.
So my only point is I got the two kids and me through the 8th inning. And the game was tied, and I'm like, don't worry, we're going to lose. Padres are going to lose so we can take off because they were dying at that point. But 8th inning, man, I'm really proud of that.
It's a lot of innings.
And they were jumping and dancing and cheering when good things happened. I was a proud man. Took the train there. They were delightful.
So next time you'll buy the cheap tickets outright.
Yeah, I don't. The park at the park is fine, but if it's $15 to be on that grassy hill, like you might as well just pay $25 and be in the bleacher or in the outfield.
Yeah, the fact that the park at the park is the same price as the worst tickets is a weird, sick joke.
It's fun out there, but
no, it's great. I love the park at the park, but it's bizarre that you pay as much to not have a seat as you do to,
I don't think
to have
people
a seat.
Realized when I was here when Petco opened, and that was a big deal out there.
Yeah.
Nobody would have imagined it would be $15 per family member.
On some nights, it's $25.
Yeah.
When the Dodgers are in town, it costs $25 to sit on a hill where you have to watch the game on a screen because it's so far away. It's crazy.
Unless you have that one seat, like right.
Yeah, there is one seat that you can see through. There, that is true. Yeah. And it's really crowded there.
Padres. All right. There was another legal case. A lot of legal stuff going on.
Yeah.
A lot of legal flubs.
All right. I'm going to try to get through this background. Feel free to interrupt me as I go. The Port of San Diego earlier this year approved its long discussed plan to build like a big thing on the Chula Vista waterfront. Convention center, marinas, hotels, retail space, the whole shebang.
We talk about things that have been talked about for a long time. This is one of them.
Okay. So
different convention center.
Yeah.
Different convention center. This is yes, exactly. So part of that deal was building a $40 million parking garage that would ostensibly serve the convention center and the hotels. And they wanted to pay for it by charging a $3.50 charge to rental cars that lease land on the port. And so that's the same way that the port paid for the parking garage that's down by the convention center and serves those hotels. But once they paid that convention center off, they suspended the fee. Earlier this year, they reinstated the fee, essentially, the same fee. So the airport now, the San Diego airport, which is a tenant of the port, has now joined a lawsuit that was brought by the rental car companies against the fee, which argues that it is not a fee, it's a tax, because the people paying the fee won't necessarily be the people benefiting from the garage that it's paying for. And so if it's a tax, it needs a 2/3 vote.
Yeah, the principle of this is basically that if you have, you can charge a fee for somebody to go to a rec center or a swimming pool or something that directly is what they're taking advantage of, right? But that if you try to lay a burden of financial cost on them to use to fund something else, then that's by de facto a tax, and taxes need a vote of the people, and that's what they're arguing. And I think what you brought up was like, well, if they thought that, why didn't they bring it up about this previous parking garage they had, right?
Exactly.
Now, when did that parking garage stop the fee?
It has been suspended for, I believe, 10 years.
Oh, okay. Well, so Prop 26 or whatever has passed since then, and that's what this is based on, right?
And so this is literally just reinstating an existing law. Like the ordinance keeps the same number. It's just like it's on again. They flipped a switch.
But that was the point of Prop 26, is that they...
So setting aside the merits of the lawsuit, politically speaking, this reignites a briefly dormant fight between the port and the airport. Earlier this year, Assemblywoman Lorena Gonzalez introduced a bill that essentially would have folded the airport into the port, into creating one single entity, which is how they actually used to be arranged. And there was some pushback to this proposal, but actually not as much as we might have expected. But she eventually essentially killed that bill for all intents and purposes, and instead proposed just creating a task force for representatives between both agencies that would get together and discuss some ways that they would improve traffic and transit getting to and from the airport. So now, then after this lawsuit from the airport was announced, and again, like this is the Chula Vista area is in her assembly district, and it threatens this like largest public expenditure in the South Bay in quite some time. Gonzalez said on Twitter that she is going to yank this like happy compromise kumbaya bill that she had put forward, and she's next session essentially threatened to repropose a bill that would overhaul governance at the airport entirely. And then the other part of this that we haven't actually entered into yet is that amid all this, the airport just a couple weeks ago released its environmental document describing the impacts and how it's going to deal with the impacts to expand Terminal 1. It's like a $3 billion project. So that, I think it'll be interesting to see if that now becomes part of this fight as well.
Yeah, I heard that people are pretty mad about that.
Yeah, the city seems to have some issues with it, and the port seems to have some issues with it. So now we're basically at, is this lawsuit valid? Was it valid in a way? Was this the best way to handle it? Or did they just kick this hornet's nest and reinstigate a fight with Lorena Gonzalez?
And under all of this is this, there's a few storylines you should be aware of. One is there's some tension between the visitor industry in the city of San Diego and downtown, and South Bay.
Right.
This would potentially take visitors away from downtown to the Gaylord Center, right? That is at play here, and the concern is that South Bay is being trampled on once again. Here's the chance to build this thing, and whatever forces, maybe Republican forces in the city of San Diego is trying to stop that, and the airport authority may be the tip of the spear of that.
Yeah, and I think just like the port district is created through the state, with the premise being that these tidelands, the San Diego Bay, is a regional asset, and it wanted to create a jurisdiction over that regional asset to make sure that asset was being leveraged for the greatest amount of environmental, economic, and social good for the region as a whole.
Right.
And so, like, charging fees for what takes place on the footprint of that tideland to reinvest into other areas within the tideland is what they do, basically. Yeah. I mean, that's basically what they do. Well, or sometimes they charge like ground lease rent to hotels, and they use. But
that's what they do all the time, right? And so I think that's what's interesting. So the reason I brought Prop 26 up is because the same sort of thing obviously killed the last expansion of the convention center downtown, where they tried to raise a tax on hotel visitors. It was determined that was an actual tax that needed the vote of the people. That all fell apart, right?
Well, sort of. That was always known to be a tax.
No, because it was a fee. They called it, their defense was that it was an assessment on the hotels themselves.
Sort of, but they conducted an election. it was just an election wherein they declared that the only people who needed to have a vote in the election were the hotel owners themselves.
But based on the idea that it was a business improvement district, not an election. Like, they didn't argue it was like a voter world. That was the voters of a business improvement district. The same way that like Little Italy votes or whatever.
Right. That was they were trying to create like a non-geographic based business improvement
At least
district.
publicly, they claimed it was a fee, which is why it was so funny when we got that hotel bill that actually said it was a tax.
Yeah, they kept referring to it as a tax because that made more sense to visitors when they were wondering what this was.
Yeah.
Now, so if that fee was in place, it makes sense to me that if that fee was in place for that parking garage on the rental cars 10 years ago before Prop 26, then Prop 26 passes and they try to do it again, I can see why the legal argument would be there to throw it out, because that's the exact one that they used to throw out the convention center one.
Yeah, it's interesting though, because the filing that they made lays out why this is a tax and not a fee, and just 100% of the arguments apply to the downtown parking garage. I mean, the arguments are basically like,
yeah, but that's because
most people who rent a car won't end up at the convention center, which I don't doubt is true. But one could also say that most of the people at the convention center will come from the airport.
But that's what Prop 26 changed. It's the one that decided that if it doesn't affect, if you don't benefit from it, then it is a tax.
Right.
And so that would make sense that changed that.
It would potentially make sense that changed. What's interesting is that, like, at no point has this been a secret that the port was doing this. They proposed it before April. They voted on it in April. This lawsuit came out in June. The airport just files this briefing without any, my understanding, without any conversations to the port, conversations to Lorena Gonzalez, without voicing concerns preemptively.
Yeah, so I think there's a perfectly good argument to say, like, where do they come from? It's bad politics. They stepped in a hornet's nest, all that stuff.
And like very like a tinny response.
Sure, but to the extent that the lawsuit is a threat, it's not the airport's fault necessarily. Like, it's a threat because of this legal argument. And if this legal argument is frivolous, then there's nothing to worry about.
Right. Yeah, I mean, they make the case that what the port is doing is unprecedented here, which I need to hear more about the fact that it's unprecedented, because it seems like they literally just restarted a fee that was already in place,
I guess.
Which seems to be like the exact definition of precedent. Yeah.
Well, anyway, the point being is that this now faster creep of very powerful change at these these government agencies that are below the elected level, this sort of airport authority, water authority, SANDAG, MTS, that this sort of stopped at the airport authority last year or a few months ago. Yeah. And now it's back.
It was, and it when Assemblymember Gonzalez killed her bill, it was interesting because we had just started having conversations about how we were surprised that there wasn't more pushback. Now, there was pushback at the time from, Mark Cafferty from the EDC said that he didn't think that this was necessarily a good way to go through about things. But then at the same time, like, Ron Roberts, not anyone's idea of like this new upstart progressive lawmaker who's trying to remake San Diego, he spoke at SANDAG and said, like, maybe this is a good idea. Maybe we should talk about this. Maybe the airport is not thinking regionally enough, which was interesting. And then the other thing that happened yesterday, so there was an immediate outcry from port leaders, from Assemblymember Gonzalez, from other leaders in the South Bay.
Lots of South Bay leaders, Ben Hueso, Mary Salas.
But there was also a pretty clear and pretty immediate negative response from like for lack of a better term, like Civility Caucus in San Diego. Mm-hmm. Like Scott Peters and Mark Cafferty were both right away like, is this the best way to handle this? What's going on here? Yeah,
I think, and Scott Peters also has his eye on the mayor's office, and if there's if labor has finally had it with the airport authority, getting in front of that was probably wise. politically.
Yeah. And then the other thing is that with the Sandag reforms that Lorena Gonzalez put forward in AB 805, like it's hard to imagine even a year ago when she proposed them that she could have seen them going this well, this quickly for her view of things. So if there was any question in her mind about the value, the political value of these sorts of reform measures for these, as you say, like quasi-governmental agencies, I think that the quick changes that she's seen at Sandag and MTS as a result of AB 805 might encourage her that this is in fact a good way to enact change.
All right, our hero of the week. So this week's hero goes to I guess it would be the California Parks thing, the department.
This is your thing, man.
The group that runs the Reserve California,
yeah.
the Parks Department. They made some changes. You might remember, I got a little grief from my friend here, but I was complaining about how hard it was to get a campsite. The new website is actually great.
I like your word choice. Complaining is the right word.
Yeah, that's fine.
You're whining, complaining.
Yeah. Well, it was hard.
That's what it was like. That's what you said.
Yeah, that tone of voice, that was exactly what you sounded like back then.
So the hard part was that the new website worked well, was nicely designed, had good UX. The problem is that they had opened it up so that instead of...
Sarah just yawned. It was awesome.
No, keep going.
You're going to have to get used to the fact that people find this interesting even if you don't.
I actually do. I just find you tiresome.
So it used to be that if you wanted one of the prime campsites along the coast or anywhere else that was really highly desired, you'd have to get on 6 months in advance. And then that 6 months in advance would be the first day of the month. So all of August opened up February 1st. So on February 1st, you got on, you looked for your days in August, and you tried, it was like a scramble, but you got it, right? Mm-hmm. What they switched to is a day by day. So February 1st, August 1st opened up. February 2nd, August 2nd opened up, like that, right? Which I think is probably a more logical way to do it.
Yes, I definitely couldn't figure out the first way if I had to do that.
Yeah, well, nobody figures, that's the hard part. Nobody figures out you screw up the first year. Next year you do it a little better, and the next year you do it. So a lot of us went through 4 years trying to figure this out or whatever. And so then they switched to the daily thing, but there was a difference. They made it so that you could change your reservations really easily. So people would book like a day, and then you would look on the website, and it looked like it was opening. Like the next day, there would be the site that you wanted open, and so you'd have to get on at 8 a.m. and fight for it. But then you'd get on at 7:30 before it was even open to be booked, and it would already be booked. And so you'd be like, well, how does that work? Well, it turns out, according to NBC 7 San Diego, they did a little piece with me and my family. It was cool. Thank you, May. But they changed that. So they're going to review how many times people can make changes to the reservations. Some people were clearly abusing it, going on and changing it. But then they also are going to make so it's very hard for like robots to just do it.
I was going to say, is it like they scalp?
Yeah, so there was
tickets?
a secondary market like growing up where it got so hard that people were hiring companies to go and for $50 a night, book you a spot. So it was so Lorena Gonzalez, assembly member, she went and proposed a law that would have gotten rid of that, but I think that put a lot of pressure on them to just change it, and just wanted to say thanks. So hopefully it works better next year.
Yeah, it's good.
Happy for you, buddy.
I'm happy for you.
This is important for other people that use these public assets as well. Just because
then why are you the only person who appears in every story?
There was another guy. Know why?
What's
because
especially funny about this is like it's the first instance I'm aware of journalistic impact from whining on a podcast.
It was Twitter too.
Yeah, okay. No, you whined a lot. But like you actually did seem to identify a failure in government. And instead of like writing about it,
which is an option
which
that
we
can
could do on our website,
news
the website that we own. Or like submitting public records requests, like calling people and holding them accountable. You came here and you just like kind of complained a lot, like cried. And
other reporters
were
wisely
like, "Oh, that seems like a story," and they wrote about it.
Story they could write.
And then they did write about it.
Well, you guys could have too.
And then after they wrote about it, an Assemblywoman proposed legislation and fixed it. None of which we can really claim any credit for.
The real heroes are the reporters who recognized that this was a story.
Yeah, what was the reporter in NBC? What was her name?
May.
What's May's last name?
Joe, TJOA.
Okay. And Claire Tregesser at KPBS wrote about it as well. So they both are the heroes of the week.
Okay, fine. It's fine. Thanks.
We didn't clown on you enough last week when you were gone, and so I feel like we really had to make up for it.
All right, let's clown on somebody for real. Our GOAT of the week.
You lose! Good day, sir!
This one goes to National City Councilman Jerry Cano. Cano? Mm-hmm. I'm not sure. It's not very often that the Union Tribune editorial board calls on an elected official to resign. But they did that in response to these reports so Jerry Cano had been accused of kind of using his elected office to perhaps get out of paying some fees on, I think, building violations on his home. And a fellow member of the city council called for an investigation of this issue. And when she did that, he responded by saying that council member had sexually harassed him. So
A significant charge.
Yes, that is a big deal all the time, but particularly in the era that we're in. Mm-hmm. So as this was being investigated, and I think taxpayer money was going to fund that investigation, he sort of indicated to the investigator, yeah, that didn't actually happen.
Imagine what the investigator would be like, what? So you're saying it didn't happen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's not a lot that can earn you a GOAT like that. Like
it's a true GOAT.
That's just bad. Like they're always talking about women potentially making things up. Come on, man. Like, don't do that.
Yeah.
Don't just say things that can ruin people.
This is the type of guy who thinks that is something women might
do
because he would do it.
Oh, God. All right. Well, we'll have all kinds of candidates at the October 6th PolitiFest. Mark it on your calendar. You need to sign up for that, though. That's required, and you can find that at politifest.org. And thanks to everybody who participates in the show, and to you guys, I guess.
Yeah.
Hey,
Good
thanks.
to see you.
Thanks to Claire and May.
Cheers.